They yanked her off the submarine control panel like she was nothing. A civilian contractor, just there to monitor systems. "Get out," the XO ordered, his face inches from hers. The captain said nothing. She walked away quietly as the missile test began. Then the unthinkable happened. The launch sequence froze. No one could make it work. The admiral appeared on screen, tension filling his voice. That's when she stepped forward, fingers flying across the keyboard. The system recognized her instantly. Her name flashed on the main display as every officer stared in disbelief. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing for more military tales of hidden heroes. The pre-dawn air hung heavy with salt as Dr. Zephyr Blackwood approached the gangway of the USS Triton. Her slender frame seemed almost fragile against the massive hull of America's newest ballistic missile submarine. Clutching her security credentials and a modest duffel bag, she paused, taking one last breath of open air before what would be weeks underwater. Commander Adira Kalani watched from the deck, her sharp eyes cataloging every detail of the civilian scientist. "Dr. Blackwood," she called out with practiced professionalism, "welcome aboard the Triton." Zephyr nodded, her expression neutral. "Thank you, Commander." As they descended into the submarine's interior, the narrow passageways forced crew members to press against bulkheads to let them pass. Zephyr felt their eyes tracking her, some curious, most suspicious. "Another civilian babysitter from DARPA," one petty officer muttered, just loud enough to be heard. "What's she even here for? Counting our coffee breaks?" his companion replied with a snicker. Commander Kalani shot them a silencing glare but said nothing to contradict their assessment. The briefing room was crowded when they arrived. Captain Merrick Rhodes, a weathered man with granite features and calculating eyes, barely glanced up from his charts as they entered. "Attention on deck," Kalani announced. The room snapped to attention until Rhodes waved a dismissive hand. "At ease." His gaze finally settled on Zephyr, offering nothing more than professional acknowledgement. "We have a guest for this patrol. Dr. Blackwood will be monitoring communications and diagnostic systems during our deployment. Per Pentagon orders, she'll have limited access to non-essential systems only." A ripple of subtle eye rolls passed through the senior officers. "Her presence is non-negotiable and comes directly from naval intelligence," Rhodes continued, his tone making clear his own reservations. "She will not interfere with operations. Any questions?" The room remained silent, but the message was clear. The civilian was tolerated, not welcomed. Hours later, Zephyr sat alone in the mess hall, methodically working through a plate of food while reviewing technical specifications on her tablet. The bench across from her creaked as Lieutenant Orion Lasco dropped into the seat, his tray landing with deliberate force. "So, systems engineer, huh?" Lasco's smile didn't reach his eyes. "What exactly are you analyzing that the Navy's own engineers can't handle?" Zephyr looked up, her expression carefully measured. "Just protocol compliance, Lieutenant. Nothing that interferes with operations." Lasco snorted. "Right. Well, stay out of the way when things get real. This isn't a research vessel. We run silent, we run deep, and civilians tend to panic when that happens." "I'll keep that in mind," she replied softly. That night, in the solitude of her tiny quarters, little more than a closet with a bunk, Zephyr reviewed schematics on her secure tablet. Her fingers traced invisible patterns over circuit diagrams and command protocols that few people on Earth fully understood. She reached into her bag, retrieving a small photograph protected in a weatherproof case. The image showed Zephyr in formal dress at what appeared to be a classified ceremony. Half the image was deliberately obscured, and the metal pin to her chest was unlike any standard military decoration. She studied it briefly before tucking it away, her expression betraying nothing of the weight she carried beneath the ocean's surface. The monotony of patrol life had settled into rhythm when klaxons suddenly blared through the submarine's narrow corridors. "Battle stations! This is not a drill! Repeat, this is not a drill!" The controlled chaos of trained professionals filled the submarine as crew members rushed to their positions. Zephyr remained at her monitoring station, seemingly forgotten in the surge of activity. Captain Rhodes strode into the control room, his presence immediately commanding attention. "Simulated hostile contact. Prepare for defensive countermeasures." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, each person executing their role in the elaborate ballet of submarine warfare. Zephyr quietly observed from her terminal, fingers occasionally tapping notes but otherwise remaining unobtrusive. Executive Officer Thaddeus Kerrigan, tall and rigid with a perpetual scowl, noticed her presence and frowned. He crossed the control room with determined strides. "Dr. Blackwood," his voice carried the edge of authority unchallenged. "You need to clear the command center. Operational protocols prohibit civilian presence during launch procedures." Zephyr looked up calmly. "Sir, my orders?" "I don't care about your orders," Kerrigan cut her off. "This is a missile submarine conducting critical defensive operations. Out. Now." The control room fell silent, all eyes shifting between the civilian and the XO. Captain Rhodes intervened, his voice level but firm. "She stays, XO. Standing orders." Kerrigan turned, surprise evident. "With all due respect, Captain, Pentagon bureaucracy doesn't supersede tactical protocol." "It's not open for discussion, Commander," Rhodes replied, tension evident in his jaw. The moment passed as the submarine continued its descent to launch depth. Suddenly, the communications officer's voice broke through. "Sir, external comms are down. Can't raise command." Rhodes moved swiftly to the station. "Diagnostics?" "All systems check out, sir. It's like we're being jammed, but there's no signature." Rhodes turned toward Zephyr, suspicion hardening his features. "Dr. Blackwood, is this part of your monitoring?" Before she could answer, the missile launch sequence initiated automatically. Alert lights bathed the control room in red as the computerized voice announced, "Missile launch sequence initiated. Authorization code accepted." "What the hell?" Rhodes demanded. "We haven't received launch authorization." Kerrigan moved to the weapons console. "Override. Abort launch sequence." The weapons officer's fingers flew across the keyboard. "System not responding to override, sir." The automated sequence continued inexorably. Stage 1, missile preparation. Stage 2, targeting parameters. Stage 3, launch tube flooding. The crew watched in horrified fascination as the sequence proceeded mechanically through each step, ignoring all attempts to abort. Stage 7, final launch authorization required. Then, nothing. The sequence froze. The submarine hung in silence, suspended between action and catastrophe. Kerrigan looked up, his eyes finding Zephyr. A smirk formed on his lips. "Maybe your monitoring glitched our systems, Doctor." The accusation hung in the air as technicians frantically tried to restore control. Minutes passed like hours as the crew attempted every override protocol in the book. Nothing worked. Rhodes stared at the frozen launch screen, his face illuminated by the pulsing red emergency lights. "If we can't regain control, we'll have to surface and establish emergency communications with command." Zephyr watched silently, her eyes betraying nothing of the calculations happening behind them. The emergency lights cast crimson shadows across tense faces as technicians worked frantically to restore systems. "Status report," Rhodes demanded. The weapons officer shook his head. "Launch sequence frozen at step 7, sir. Nothing's working. It's like the system is waiting for something we don't have." Suddenly, Zephyr stood from her station. The movement, decisive and purposeful, drew every eye in the control room. "Captain, I need direct terminal access," she said, her voice transformed, no longer the quiet observer, but commanding, certain. Kerrigan moved to block her path. "Absolutely not. This civilian is not touching our weapons systems." Zephyr didn't back down, her eyes now steely with resolve locked with Rhodes. "Captain Rhodes, Phantom Protocol is in effect. Authorization Blackwood Epsilon 790. The room fell silent. Even the mechanical hum of the submarine seemed to quiet. Rhodes stared at her, recognition and disbelief battling across his features. After a long moment, he spoke. "Give her access, now." "Sir?" Kerrigan protested. "That's an order, XO." The weapons officer moved aside as Zephyr approached the main terminal. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with practiced precision. Lines of code streamed across the screen, protocols and commands beyond the training of anyone else present. The crew watched in stunned silence as this unremarkable civilian navigated the most classified systems of their vessel with absolute authority. The system suddenly reactivated. On the main display appeared, "Final authorization, Blackwood, Zephyr E, Phantom Protocol authenticated." The launch sequence completed its simulation and reset. "Communications restored, sir," the comms officer announced, Kerrigan's face contorted with confusion. "What the hell is this?" Admiral Neva's stern face appeared on the now functioning main screen. Captain Rhodes, confirmation that Dr. Blackwood has authorized the simulated launch sequence. Drill complete. Rhodes stepped forward. Admiral, with respect, what just happened on my boat? The Admiral's expression remained impassive. After the Valiant incident 3 years ago, we implemented Phantom Protocol. Every nuclear submarine carries one civilian whose true purpose is known only to top command, the final human firewall. Only they can authorize actual launch sequence completion, remotely if necessary. The control room remained perfectly still as the Admiral continued. Dr. Blackwood isn't just monitoring your systems, Captain. She designed them. She holds the highest clearance in naval history and reports directly to the Joint Chiefs and the President. Every eye in the control room fixed on Zephyr, seeing her truly for the first time, not as an interloper, but as their ultimate safeguard. With all due respect, Admiral, Kerrigan interjected, why weren't the command staff briefed on this? Because the command staff is precisely who we're protecting against, Commander, Admiral Neva replied bluntly. The Valiant incident proved that even our most trusted officers could be compromised. Dr. Blackwood's identity and authority had to remain classified at the highest level. Kerrigan's jaw tightened as he fought to maintain his composure. Around him, the crew exchanged glances of shock and disbelief. Resume normal operations, Captain, Admiral Neva ordered. Full debrief upon your return to port. Neva out. The screen went dark, leaving the control room in stunned silence. Rhodes turned to Zephyr, seeing her with new eyes. Secure the command center, he ordered. Dr. Blackwood, join me in my quarters. Now. As they exited, Zephyr could feel the weight of every stare following her. The whispers had already begun. In the captain's quarters, Spartan but private, Rhodes closed the door firmly behind them. Sit down, Doctor. Zephyr complied, her posture military perfect despite her civilian status. Rhodes paced the small confines of his cabin. 3 years. You've been embedding on submarines for 3 years, and not once did anyone suspect your true purpose. That was the design, Captain, Zephyr replied, her voice steady. The effectiveness of Phantom Protocol depends on absolute secrecy. If potential adversaries knew there was a secondary human authorization requirement, they would target it. And the Valiant incident? Rhodes asked, stopping to face her. What really happened? A shadow crossed Zephyr's face, the first genuine emotion she had displayed since coming aboard. The official report states that the USS Valiant experienced a systems malfunction during a routine patrol. I know what the official report says, Rhodes interrupted. I want to know what actually happened. Zephyr hesitated, her eyes drifting to the floor momentarily. A coordinated attempt to seize control of a nuclear submarine's launch capabilities. The specifics remain classified even to me, but what I do know is that the only thing that prevented an unauthorized launch was a programming error in the targeting system. Rhodes sank into his chair. And that's why every submarine now carries someone like you, a human failsafe who can remotely authorize or block a launch? Not someone like me, Captain, just me. I rotate through the fleet, different identity each time, different cover story, but always the same purpose. And today's drill? Wasn't a drill, Zephyr admitted. Someone was testing the vulnerabilities in the launch protocol. Admiral Neva has been tracking a potential security breach for months. Today was a controlled test to identify weaknesses. Rhodes studied her face carefully. You're not just a systems engineer, are you? A ghost of a smile touched Zephyr's lips. My doctorate is genuine, if that's what you're asking. But no, my primary function is security. Why you? Rhodes asked, the question that had been burning since the revelation. Out of all the qualified personnel in naval intelligence, why place this burden on you? Zephyr's composure wavered for a moment. She reached into her pocket and withdrew the photograph Rhodes had glimpsed earlier. This time, she unfolded it completely and handed it to him. The image showed Zephyr in formal dress, but beside her stood a naval officer in full dress uniform, his arm around her waist, their expressions mirroring the same quiet strength. Commander Everett Blackwood, Zephyr said softly. My husband. He was the weapons officer on the Valiant. Understanding dawned on Rhodes's face. He didn't make it. Admiral Neva's face appeared, his expression grave. Captain, we have a situation. That Russian submarine is not acting on orders from Moscow. Intelligence suggests it's been compromised by the same group that attempted the Valiant incident. Zephyr stepped forward. They're testing the new protocols. Precisely, Neva confirmed. We believe they're attempting to provoke an incident that would force you into launch preparation. They want to see if Phantom Protocol is fleet-wide or isolated to specific vessels. Rhodes's jaw tightened. What are my orders, Admiral? Maintain evasion. Do not engage unless directly threatened. If they force you into launch protocols, allow Dr. Blackwood to handle authentication. Neva hesitated. And Captain, be advised that we suspect internal compromise. Trust no one outside this room. The screen went dark, leaving Rhodes and Zephyr in silence. Internal compromise, Rhodes repeated. Someone on my boat. Zephyr's expression remained carefully neutral. It's a possibility we have to consider. Who has access to launch systems besides the command staff? Technically no one, Zephyr replied. But a sophisticated adversary could have implanted someone months or years ago. Someone with the technical expertise to bypass standard protocols. Rhodes rubbed his temples. We need to flush them out before they act. I might have a way, Zephyr said, her mind already formulating a plan. But it means revealing more of Phantom Protocol than I'm authorized to share. At this point, Doctor, I'm more concerned with keeping my submarine and crew secure than with maintaining classified protocols. Zephyr nodded. Then I suggest we create a situation that forces our saboteur to act prematurely. When they returned to the control room, the tension was palpable. The Russian submarine had closed distance, now circling like a predator. Sir, the sonar operator reported, they're activating weapons systems. Battle stations, Rhodes ordered calmly. Prepare countermeasures. As the crew scrambled to action, Rhodes leaned close to Kerrigan. XO, initiate pre-launch sequence Alpha. Kerrigan's eyes widened. Sir, that's a first strike protocol. I'm aware, Commander. Consider it a readiness drill. Kerrigan hesitated only momentarily before complying. Aye, sir. Initiating pre-launch sequence Alpha. Alert lights flashed as the automated system announced. Missile pre-launch sequence initiated. All stations prepare for authorization protocol. Zephyr monitored her station, watching not the system but the crew's reactions. Most displayed professional focus, but her trained eye caught minute tells. A technician whose fingers hesitated too long over his console, a communications officer whose eyes darted too frequently to the weapons station. Stage 1, missile preparation, the system announced. Rhodes stood at the center of the control room, projecting calm authority. This is a readiness drill only. Proceed as trained. Stage 2, targeting parameters. Zephyr caught Rhodes's eye and nodded subtly toward the communications station. The officer there, Lieutenant Bellamy, was sweating visibly despite the cool temperature of the submarine. Stage 3, launch tube flooding. Bellamy's hand slipped toward a pocket in his uniform. Commander Kerrigan, Zephyr called out clearly. Security Protocol 739. Without hesitation, Kerrigan moved behind Bellamy, restraining him before he could withdraw whatever was concealed in his pocket. Sir, he's got some kind of device. Rhodes approached as Kerrigan extracted a small electronic module from Bellamy's pocket. What is this, Lieutenant? Bellamy's face contorted with hatred. You're all blind, following orders without question. Do you have any idea what these weapons could do? I know exactly what they can do, Rhodes replied coldly. That's why we have protocols to ensure they're never used without proper authorization. Take him to the brig, Rhodes ordered. Full isolation protocol. As Marines escorted Bellamy away, the tactical officer called out, Sir, the Russian submarine is breaking off. They're withdrawing at high speed. They know their asset is compromised, Zephyr explained quietly. The operation is blown. Rhodes turned to her. How did you know it was him? I didn't, Zephyr admitted. But I knew someone would react when we initiated launch procedures. The saboteur couldn't risk allowing a launch they couldn't control. The submarine maintained alert status for hours until the Russian vessel was well beyond weapons range. Only then did Rhodes order stand down to normal operations. In the quiet aftermath, Rhodes found Zephyr in the officer's mess, reviewing security protocols on her tablet. Command wants a full debrief when we return to port, he said, sitting across from her. But I'd like my own answers first. Zephyr set down her tablet. What would you like to know, Captain? How deep does this conspiracy go? Who are these people? We don't know their full extent, Zephyr replied honestly. After the Valiant, we identified several cells operating within military and intelligence communities across multiple nations. They call themselves the nullifiers. Nullifiers, Rhodes repeated. What's their objective? They believe nuclear weapons represent an existential threat to humanity that cannot be controlled by governments, Zephyr explained. Their goal is to seize control of nuclear launch capabilities and force global disarmament. Noble goal, terrible methods, Rhodes observed. Yes, Zephyr agreed. They're willing to risk starting the very apocalypse they claim to prevent. Rhodes studied her. And your husband discovered them on the Valiant. Zephyr's composure wavered slightly. Everett noticed anomalies in the launch systems weeks before the incident. He reported them through proper channels, but his concerns were dismissed as technical glitches. When he realized what was happening during the actual attempt, he manually disabled the targeting systems at the cost of his own life. He died a hero, Rhodes said softly. He died doing his duty, Zephyr corrected, as would any officer under your command. Rhodes nodded in understanding. And you've carried on his work. Someone had to, she replied simply. The next morning, as the Triton surfaced to re-establish communications with Fleet Command, Rhodes called the entire crew to assembly in the missile bay, the only space large enough to accommodate everyone simultaneously. Yesterday, we faced a threat not just to this vessel, but to the very principles that govern our most solemn responsibility, Rhodes began. For those who haven't been briefed, Lieutenant Bellamy was part of a rogue organization attempting to compromise our nuclear launch capabilities. Murmurs passed through the assembled sailors. His capture was made possible through the vigilance and expertise of someone many of you dismissed as an unnecessary civilian observer. Rhodes turned toward Zephyr. Dr. Blackwood, would you join me? Zephyr stepped forward, conscious of every eye upon her. Dr. Zephyr Blackwood holds the highest security clearance in the United States Navy. She personally designed the fail-safe systems that protect our nuclear arsenal from unauthorized use. Rhodes's voice carried through the bay. And yesterday, she protected every one of us from a threat we didn't even recognize. The crew remained silent, processing this revelation. I won't pretend to understand all the classified details of Dr. Blackwood's role, Rhodes continued. But I know this. When you serve aboard a submarine carrying weapons that could end civilization as we know it, there is no higher duty than ensuring those weapons can never be misused. That is Dr. Blackwood's mission, and now it is all of ours as well. Rhodes turned to Zephyr. On behalf of the United States Navy and the crew of the USS Triton, I want to thank you for your service. To Zephyr's surprise, Commander Kerrigan stepped forward and saluted her crisply. One by one, every member of the crew followed suit, a gesture of respect rarely granted to civilians. 2 days later, as the Triton docked at Naval Base Kitsap, Admiral Nevy waited on the pier with a security detail. The crew lined the gangway as Zephyr prepared to disembark, each sailor saluting as she passed. At the hatch, Captain Rhodes handed her a folded flag in a triangular case. The President wants to see you, something about the next generation of security protocols. Zephyr accepted the flag with a solemn nod. I just did my job, Captain. Rhodes smiled slightly. No, Doctor. You did everyone's job. The job we didn't even know needed doing. As she walked down the pier toward the waiting Admiral, Rhodes called after her. Will we see you again, Dr. Blackwood? Zephyr turned back. Perhaps. Under different circumstances with a different name, but I'll be there when needed. We'll be watching for you, Rhodes promised. That's the point, Captain, Zephyr replied with the ghost of a smile. You won't know to watch until the moment I'm needed.